I have to be honest and tell the truth about the Big Ten in my rankings and preview for the 2025 season. Now, right now, for the last 2 years, the Big Ten has been the best conference in all of college football. I know SEC fans, stay with me for a second, because the Big Ten, last 2 national championships, 5-1 against the SEC, and 2-0 in the college football playoff. You can go argue with somebody else. This is why you come here, is to get the truth. We're going to break down the teams from 18-1. Let's get to it. These rankings are based upon where they will finish in the conference. So technically, somebody can have a better record overall because they played a soft non-conference schedule and have a worse record in conference and be lower. So you could have a team that's like 9-3 and be behind a team that is 8-4 because of how they performed in the conference. Just so we're clear. Number 18, the Purdue Boilermakers. Their new head coach, Barry Odom, he was a great choice for their new head coaching job, but his job is going to be to try to fix some of the identity issues that Purdue has had the last couple of seasons. And they got their offensive coordinator, Josh Henson, who has an array of options at quarterback. He has Bennett Meredith, who stuck around because he loves being a Boilermaker. Easy guy to root for. You got Malachi Singleton in his brief time at Arkansas. He was pretty impressive. And you got Eli Colson, who was a menace in small ball high school in Georgia. And he's got a lot of promise as well. Let's be honest, it is going to take a minute for Barry Odom to get this right. But his track record at UNLV shows that he knows how to use the transfer portal to his advantage, and that enables and empowers his assistants to do their jobs well. 40 points per game allowed last year is a lot to come back from in one offseason. And somebody, honestly, has to finish last. Sorry, Purdue fans, but things are looking up, so stay tuned. Number 17, the Northwestern Wildcats. This was one of the most ineffective offenses in all of college football last year, but they get a boost with the hire of Zach Lujan, who won an FCS national championship at South Dakota State. Now, Preston Stone, he couldn't hang on to the starting job at SMU last year, but he's proven that he can play at a high level if the circumstances are right around him. And the transfer addition of Griffin Wild is one of my sleeper moves of the offseason for this Wildcats team. But even with his boost and returning a defense that should make things tough on several of their opponents, who am I supposed to put the Wildcats above in the Big Ten? This is a team that I'm worried about starting 1-3 because 3 of their first 4 games are against Tulane, Oregon, and UCLA. Now, if Northwestern can reach week 6 at 3-2 instead of 2-3, this team actually might go to a bowl game. And for David Braun, this will be well enough to keep Wildcat fans happy. Number 16, the Maryland Terrapins. Mike Locksley, dude gave Maryland 3 straight winning seasons with 3 straight bowl wins from 2021 to 2023. And he had those Terrapins looking like they were going to get back to the level that they were back when I was in college. You know, Vernon Davis, Lights Out, everybody, all of those guys. Now, last year, the wheels fell off, and some of those numbers behind the numbers began to look a little bit concerning. Yes, they had 3 winning seasons in a row before going 4-8 in 2024, but they also haven't had a winning record in Big Ten play since 2010. And one of the most interesting things about this team is Justin Martin, who transferred in from UCLA, quarterback from Inglewood High School, who I know and like. Now, he's going to get the rare opportunity of being a Big Ten starter after spending 3 years backing up Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Ethan Garbers at UCLA. But if Maryland's offense doesn't look functional, you might see a lot of internal and external pressure for true freshman Malik Washington to jump in the saddle as hometown hero. But I would love, and I'm hoping to see Martin play good football so that he can be the starter for that October 18th game against the Bruins at UCLA. Now, the goal for this team, for this Maryland team this season, is simple. Go 3-0 in non-conference play, then fight like heck every week to keep their head above water and produce 3 to 4 wins to get to a bowl game. Simple, right? Number 15, the Wisconsin Badgers. Yikes, how the mighty have fallen. Now, I'm worried about the Badgers because they haven't had back-to-back seasons with 7 or less wins since the beginning of the Barry Alvarez era. And their head coach now, Mr. Luke Fickell's, his recruiting hasn't been the problem, because if there is a problem, it really seems to be the attempt to remake the Badgers into a balanced offense instead of the red, right, and bulldozer that strikes fear into the heart of most Big Ten opponents. Because they brought in Billy Edwards from Maryland to add some accuracy to their passing game. But the key to winning in Madison is going to be the same as that it's always been. Get behind that offensive line of upperclassmen that's averaging 6'5", 315 pounds, and feed the rock to whichever of their back averages the closest to 5 yards carry. But the most interesting thing about this offense is that it'll be in the hands of offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes. And he left his last 2 gigs at Baylor and Kansas without a whole lot of fanfare. But he did do some objectively positive things in Waco and at BYU before that. So there is hope. Now, defensively, the Badgers hit the portal hard despite having back-to-back top 30 recruiting classes. And that gives off a little bit of desperation to try to get things right as soon as possible, a la Mr. Brian Kelly down there at LSU. But desperation is better than apathy. But it doesn't exactly inspire confidence that you have to wonder if the Badgers fan base isn't split over the fact that they had Jim Leonhard in the building and let him go and become one of the best secondary coaches in the NFL in favor of Fickell and his Cincy college football playoff run. Number 14, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Now, there are people at Rutgers who cover the Big Ten that believe that last year's team could have been special if they could have only stopped the run. Like, I'm serious. They really believe that. There are very smart people that believe that the 2024 Rutgers Scarlet Knights should have been 11-2 instead of 7-6. And when you go back to the tape, it's honestly not a crazy argument. The man pulled a Texas Tech and went shopping for an all-new defensive line that includes Eric O'Neal, Donald DeGoey from James Madison, Bradley Weaver from the University of Ohio, and Doug Blue Eli from USF. But the question is, will it work? Well, anything is better than last year. There was nowhere to go but up. And having to outscore opponents because you can't get stops is not the way to win football games. Anthony Kaliak-Mattis is a dependable option at quarterback. Now, he's got a ton of experience, and as long as Rutgers can replace Kyle Monaghan's running back production in the aggregate, I think that you can see an offense that ranks in the top half of the Big Ten. What I worry about most with this year's team is the back half of their schedule. They play 4 teams that I've predicted to go to the college football playoff in their final 6 games. That's going to be tough. Number 13, Michigan State Spartans. Now, it hurts me to have Michigan State at number 13 at the risk of their 4th losing season in a row, because that's something that they haven't had since the beginning of the 1980s. Now, I'm a big fan of their head coach, Mr. Jonathan Smith, who I played against in college. And I'm an even bigger fan of their quarterback, Aiden Childs, which is why last year was so confusing to me. Low percentage of throws, the turnovers, and it's like the trust was never really there after a disastrous loss to Boston College. Now, what is encouraging about this team is that last offseason, instead of pushing Childs out the door, they sought to fortify the talent around him. Now, I love the vote of confidence from Smith and the quarterback that followed him from Oregon State, because they got deep threat Amari Kelly that comes over from Middle Tennessee State, and multifaceted Sacramento State transfer running back Elijah Tolliver, who's going to give Childs someone that he can trust in the check down game. Now, I'm not saying that the kid is going to be Cam Scatterboo, but Sac State running back transfers are going to have a little bit of Swiss Army knife reputation because of that. Now, here's the truth. The Spartans have too talented of a coaching staff not to improve on offense in 2025. But can they fix the pass rush? Now, last year, if you take away the Purdue game, the Spartans had 2 sacks in 8 Big Ten games. That's terrible. 2. Can you imagine the pressure that was on those DBs last year, knowing that they could not make a single solitary mistake in coverage because the pass rush was not going to give them a break, not even a little bit? So why do I have the Spartans so low? It's because I'm not sure that they have fixed the problem. and they have a lot of eggs in the basket of Air Force transfer David Santiago and returning edge rusher Jalen Thompson, but neither of those guys have shown the type of playmaking that would inspire me to say that Michigan State is on the come up. Now, I do believe that a bowl game is within reach, but it is going to be a tough road. Number 12, the Indiana Hoosiers. Do you think that Indiana Hoosiers fans care if they come back to earth a little bit after last year's magical run? Because their head coach, Kurt Cingnetti, already signed an extension. And he's done enough for me to believe that Indiana is done being a doormat in the Big Ten and in college football in general. But not many teams lost as much production as Indiana did this offseason. And it's only natural to expect this team that is going to have a reset year. But at the same time, reset does not mean terrible, going back to the old Indiana days, because it's actually hard to envision a more perfect marriage of head coach and quarterback than Kurt Cingnetti and Cal transfer Fernando Mendoza. The kid is tough, he is smart, he is accurate, just a good dude. My guess is that this Indiana team enters their September 20th game against Illinois at 3-0. And then it really comes down to whether this Hoosiers-led defense by Mikael Kamara and then their other transfers, Hosea Wheeler and Stephen Daly, if they can harass Luke Altmaier into making some mistakes in that game. Now, if Indiana beats Illinois, throw this prediction out the window because at that point, all bets are off. But starting of Big Ten play with hosting the Illini and then having to travel to play Iowa and Oregon is already a tougher schedule than Indiana played in all of 2024. Now, the potential breakout star for this team is Maryland transfer running back Roman Hemby. Now, he's had back-to-back 600-plus yard seasons coming into this year, so it would not surprise me to see him eclipse 1,000 yards and earn all-conference honors. So I know Indiana fans are going to be a little bit disappointed by this ranking, but they do have a chance to overperform. Number 11, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Now, I know their fans are going to be upset. They're like, we're better than that. This is our year. We're back. Back-to-back bowl games, back-to-back winning seasons after 7 consecutive losing seasons. But the question is at the quarterback position. Now, Dylan Raiola came out of high school highly touted, and he finished his freshman season on the struggle bus, if we're being honest. Now, in his last 8 games, and mind you, this is a kid I like, but we got to be honest, that Raiola, he threw 5 touchdowns and 8 interceptions and was exposed as not being able to create his own offense with his legs because he's not mobile. So that's something that hopefully he worked on in the offseason. But he still clearly got freakish talent as a passer. Kid's got a cannon for an arm. And his new offensive coordinator, Dana Holgorsen, who came in last year, is going the Chip Kelly route and deciding to commit to being Nebraska's offensive coordinator going forward, which could mean very good things for both Raiola and this Huskers offense. Now, I do have to say that they're off to a great start by adding Dane Key from Kentucky and Nazia Hunter from Cal at wide receiver, which are big upgrades because both of them are proven producers and both guys have been known to aid their quarterback in finding open spots in coverage after the play has left the pocket. Now, these are the perfect additions for a guy like Raiola who can fire the ball, 60, 70 yards down the field while going backwards because the kid's arm is serious. But my biggest worry about this Nebraska team going into 2025 is graduating Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher and losing James Williams to Florida State. Now, if this defensive line goes from a strength to a weakness, what other parts of this team can we point to at this point in time and say they got much better through either the portal or through recruiting or just through development that's going to make up for that downgrade? Now, the positive point, like my biggest confidence in Nebraska is their schedule, because there's only 2 Big Ten games that I look at and feel with over 75% certainty that they won't be able to be competitive in. Now, if they can beat Cincinnati to open up the season, then they should have a legitimate shot at double-digit wins after a bowl game. Now, the only reason why I have them 11th in this depth is because I worry about that they could run into some of the same problems that Rutgers had last year when it comes to stopping the run. And if you cannot stop the run in the Big Ten, you will not win football games. Number 10, the USC Trojans. But why are you downing them so much? You got the #1 recruiting class in the country. That's in 2026. Them kids can't help you in 2025. And even though that they had Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson choose to leave in the transfer portal, USC still has one of the best wide receiver rooms in college football, if not possibly the best, even though the people don't give them the credit for it. And also they have Ja'Amari Reed and DJ Wingfield. They were perfect portal additions to this offensive line for the same type of scheme that they run and the amount USC throws the ball, because you got to be able to protect. Now, I wanted to lead with something positive because the rest of what I have to say is honestly pretty bleak. Lincoln Riley has a proven track record with mobile quarterbacks. He has the opposite track record with guys who are pocket-paced passers. Now, New Mexico transfer Eli Sanders, hell of a runner at running back, and he can catch passes out of the backfield as well, just like Jacavius Marks did last season. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, they have a blue chip defender on paper, but the question is, will Anthony Lucas play hard? Has he improved? And then will their big 6'7" middle linebacker Eric Gentry stay healthy? Are Bishop Fitzgerald and a kid that I know well and like DJ Harvey, are they going to have the freedom to make plays that they had at their previous destinations? Are the two 330-plus pound defensive tackles that they brought in going to be productive, or were they just trying to get better to look good getting off the bus like everybody else in the Big Ten? Because I have too many questions to make this one of the top teams in the conference just out of the gate. But could it happen? Sure, right? But that doesn't mean that I do not believe that they'll start fast. Because with non-conference slate of Missouri State, Georgia Southern, and welcome back Clay Helton for them, because that may actually turn out to be a game that USC fans are not happy about if they do not blow him out of the water. They also have Purdue and Michigan State at home. Now, stuff after that, it gets real. However, once the Trojans get into the heart of Big Ten play, that's when we will find out who they are and the depth of this roster as well. The other question is, will this staff have the humility to make adjustments when things aren't working? Because that's the only thing that is going to give them a chance to get back to the promised land and being one of college football's best brands instead of one of college football's biggest wastes of potential. Number 9, UCLA Bruins. Now, I know USC fans are throwing stuff at the screen right now. Just bear with me. And I know Tennessee fans don't want to hear this, but the quarterback UCLA added this offseason is very, very good. And that's NICO Iamaleava. And he might not have, make back-to-back college football appearances after leaving Rocky Top last year to come over to Southern California, where he is from. But he does make a team that finished last year 4-2 and 1 touchdown away from being 5-1, a legitimate threat to upset some folks in the Big Ten in 2025. Now, I spent time with Deshaun Foster this offseason. Go on Unafraid show, watch the interview. It was amazing. And there's a quiet confidence surrounding this Bruins roster because they've had an uptick in recruiting. And that also stems from the way both sides of the ball finished the year last year, as well as having 2 linebackers be picked in the first 52 picks of last year's NFL draft. So people are believing there is momentum growing there. But my biggest question with this UCLA team is whether Javian Thomas or Jalen Berger or really anybody is going to be an every down feature back in this offense. Now, I do believe that their wide receiver, Quasi Gilmer, that he steps up and potentially becomes the second best sophomore receiver in the Big Ten outside of Jeremiah Smith. Now, I do also believe that UCLA's defense continues to be physical and stingy despite having 3 new starters at the linebacker crew because they've proven that they're putting out NFL caliber linebackers. So they should have some in the pipeline. Now, this team, they could go 7-5, but I'd be thrilled with their progress if they did that, especially since they have one of the harder schedules in the conference, opening up with Utah and then visiting UNLV and playing against 3 of last year's college football playoff participants. That is going to be a tough road to hoe, but they should be significantly better. Now, what I do know is that there is going to be some heat on the battle for LA at the end of the season, because last year, USC kept UCLA from bowl eligibility, and who knows, maybe the exact opposite will happen this time around. Number 8, the Minnesota Golden Gophers. You got PJ Fleck, who went 8-5 last year with a brand new contract in hand, because they don't want that man going nowhere else to row his boat. And Minnesota had their hardest schedule since 2017. And now the dude has 4 straight bowl wins and tied the school record last year for wins over a 4-year span with 32. Those 32 wins over 4 years actually tied him with an era where he was also the head coach 3 out of the 4 years. Now that's 2016 to 2019. Now this is the best Gophers coach of all time, if we're being honest. And I'm sick of people pretending like he should be on the hot seat, or that his tenure has been somewhat of a disappointment, because it has not in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But what I can say is talk about 2025 and what they should be able to accomplish. A lot of what this team can accomplish is going to depend on the mountain of a quarterback that they have waiting in the wings. 6'5", 230-pound Drake Lindsey. Now, if he is ready to go, the running game is not going to be a focal point of the defenses. And the offense might actually take a step forward from what they got out of Max Brosmer in 2024. If not, it might be a long year for the Gophers trying to win battles at the line of scrimmage and running on 1st through 4th down, playing run and punt football. That ain't the wave right now. Now, the interesting thing, though, about the Golden Gophers schedule is that this year is that outside of very tough road games against Oregon and Ohio State, there aren't really any games where they're going to be outclassed as far as talent on the field. So a lot of this is going to come down to coaching. And their guy, PJ Fleck, who they believe in, isn't setting records at Minnesota by accident. And I'm betting on him to have another 8 to 9 win season and keep things rolling in Minneapolis. Number 7, the Iowa Hawkeyes. You cannot make me enjoy foul baiting in the NBA. And you cannot make me enjoy Iowa on the offensive side of the ball. It's not possible. But maybe, just maybe, the pairing of FCS superstar Mark Gronkowski at quarterback and Tim Lester at offensive coordinator will give the Hawkeyes their first 700-yard receiver since 2019. Yes, I said 700 yards. I didn't say 1,000. Mark Gronkowski did a little bit of everything, and that earned him a 37-3 record at South Dakota State. But the gravity out in Iowa City seems to pull every single quarterback back down to earth until they're nothing more than a handoff delivery facilitator. That's it. And then they scored, 18 points a game. The Hawkeyes aren't super portal dependent. And their head coach, Kirk Ferentz, he stayed loyal to his guys, which I might not have seen as an intelligent move a couple years back. But after having to sit down with Dabo Swinney, go check that interview out on Unafraid Show, it was excellent as well, and seeing the luxury and rarity that 2 to 3 years of development in the same system can be, this actually might be the reason that the Hawkeyes outperform my expectations this year. But to outperform expectations, Iowa is going to need guys like Xavier Nwankpa, and at least to meet those expectations that the former #1 safety in America coming out of high school, because he just has 2 interceptions in 3 years. They also need talented defensive end Max Lewinley to flirt with double-digit sacks this season. Iowa is going to need all of their potential playmakers on offense and defense to step up, because this schedule has Indiana, who was in the college football playoff last year, even though we've talked about them and, what they lost. They do have Oregon and Penn State at home, which is a plus. And they have road visits to Wisconsin, Nebraska, and USC. Now, they didn't win the schedule lotto by avoiding the college football playoff participants that are going to be visiting Iowa, but they do have the double disadvantage of their 50-50 games being played in places that are honestly historically tough to get road wins. Number 6, the Michigan Wolverines. One of the more interesting developments in the 2025 college football season was Fresno State quarterback who transferred out Mikey Keene, that he was not physically healthy for the spring, which allowed the high-priced super freshman Bryce Underwood to get a whole lot of reps as the number one. Now, I am sure that Michigan's head coach Jerome Moore and the rest of that staff, that they're going to be tempted to just press play on the future of Michigan football and put Bryce Underwood out there. But doing that could close the door on this opportunity to grab a spot in the 2025 college football playoff. Would that be worth it if that's the case? Because that's a fascinating gamble. When you're 1 year removed from being national champions, do you make the move for the future, or do you really just focus on right now in this season? Because the question is, can Michigan really afford to take a step back if the possibility exists that Mikey Keene could get them a shot at the playoff right now? Legitimate question. Let's just ignore the quarterback issue outright. Let's just set it aside for the moment and set aside the suspension of their head coach, Jerome Moore. This roster, when you look at it from top to bottom, is good enough to be in the conversation for a spot in the college football playoff. And that's without me being tricked by the big name defensive transfers that weren't actually major contributors at the big name schools that they came from. All you need to know is that Justice Hayes, their transfer running back, running behind Giovanni Elihadi, is a good enough plan to get the Wolverines half these wins on their schedule. Now, you know they're going to grind out victories in the run game. And there's nothing on the 2025 schedule that should intimidate any Michigan fans. Not even the one game that they should lose on paper, and that game against Ohio State, because can we call it anything less than 50-50, especially after what we saw last year? And 4 straight losses. I do not believe that Michigan to the college football playoff is a smart bet, especially with the temptation to play Bryce Underwood. But it's not a bad bet. It could definitely happen, and it's definitely possible. Number 5, the Washington Huskies. People are like, whoa, really? Yes, y'all are sleeping on the Huskies right now. Pay attention. Listen up. Now, I believe that that this team is 1 year away from having the offensive and defensive line to be a true threat in the Big Ten. But they're good enough in a bunch of areas to potentially make up for that in this season. Now, Jed Fish, the dude has had a year to get his bearings out there on Mont Lake. Now, he might have a bunch of fans from his previous stop at Arizona that don't like him for leaving to take that job in Seattle. But you should always pay attention to the people closest to somebody, because it reveals a whole lot that a bunch of coaches and a bunch of players left Arizona to go up there to Washington with them, and they are still there. And while Fish didn't have the immediate success that Kurt Singletti had at Indiana with all his James Madison transfers, he might make a serious jump in year 2 with guys like Damon Williams at quarterback, who I am very high on. Their running back, Jonah Coleman, looks to be in much better shape, and Adam Muhammad as well. Then you look at their cornerbacks. These dudes are long. Takario Davis, who waited a year to follow Fish to Washington, them dudes are long. The Huskies were aces at home last year, and they're going to need that same energy in 2025 because they host Ohio State, Illinois, and Oregon. Now, that's a tough road to hoe right there. Can they win all 3 of those games? Probably not. It is highly unlikely that they go 3-0 in those games. But they can do enough along the rest of the way to show the College Football Playoff Committee that they belong. And like I said in the opening, the skill positions are there for UW. But this offensive line is thin, is wafer thin, bro. And in terms of experience, and the defensive line, they do have some experience, but it lacks in production. But if those units do overperform, you're going to have to look out for the Huskies to potentially take that last Big Ten spot in the college football playoff. Number 4, the Illinois Fighting Illini. When some people look at this Illinois team, they're like, oh, they're looking at the eye, they're looking at the brand. They're like, oh, yeah, they'll be okay. They're not going to do anything special. When I look at this team, I see the fact that they brought back 16 starters from last year, 18 from the bowl game, and I look at a defense that only allowed 3 touchdowns or less 7 times last year waiting around in a sea of inexperienced Big Ten quarterbacks. So why not Illinois? Because last year, Illinois gets to 10 wins for the first time since 2001. And I'm picking them to go right ahead and do the same thing in 2025. A big reason that I believe that Illinois is going to buck the historical trend of inconsistency is their transfer portal strategy. Now, they don't take a lot of dudes that sat behind other dudes at Power 4 schools. They either produced at a similar stature at their school, or they were producing at the G5 level. Because you got Hudson Clement, plug-and-play wide receiver, who's coming over from West Virginia. James Thompson was on his way to possibly being an NFL pick at Wisconsin before a torn pec cost him the 2024 season. Thompson is joined by Kurt Neal and Leon Lowry as transfers from Madison. And you pair them guys with returning edge rushing linebacker Jay Jacobs, you're going to have an active defense. And that's what Brett Bielema holds his hat on. And y'all, go over to Unafraid Show. Great Brett Bielema interview over there too. Just saying. Maybe next year we'll hit all the coaches. But let's look at this Illinois schedule though, because they host Ohio State and USC, but they have to brave Duke, Indiana, and Washington on the road. And as long as they go 3-2 in those games and take care of business the rest of the way, that should be good enough to earn a spot in the college football playoff at 10-2. Now, imagine Wisconsin and Arkansas fans watching Brett Bielema coach the Illini in January. They're going to be mad, boy. Well, you might not have to imagine it because I got it happening. Number 3, the defending champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes. This team has 2 of the biggest question marks in the Big Ten. Whether or not offensive coordinator Mr. Brian Hartline can get Julian Sayin ready to play at a high enough level to keep the fans from calling for change. And number 2, whether James Peoples and CJ Donaldson can play like Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson in long enough to give Julian Sayin time to mature and grow and become the next great Ohio State quarterback. I've had a lot to say about the pressure on this team to succeed because for a lot of the fan bases, a national championship would satiate the fan base. But the fact that they haven't beaten Michigan since 2019, it adds to a lot of unique tension and the pressure that is building up behind the scenes, even though Ryan Day's job has to be safe at this point in time, right? But if I am going to face this pressure and I'm him, I want to face it with 2 of arguably the best players in the conference on any roster. You got the wide receiver Jeremiah Smith and you got the DB Caleb Downs. Now, on the defensive side, no rational person is going to expect new defensive coordinator Matt Patricia to take over for Jim Knowles and maintain the top defense in the conference. But I don't think that they're going to slip too far because some of these young guys are stepping into special spots and they could be special. You got Edric Houston and you got Devin Sanchez. They're going to carry the torch forward to make the Buckeyes a dominant force in the years to come. Now, it's just hard to know if the future is as soon as August 30th versus Texas or whether it's in 2025 at all. It is going to be a challenging road for Ohio State in the Big Ten in 2025 because they got road games in Seattle versus Washington. They got to go to Champaign versus Illinois, as well as having to go to Ann Arbor as well. But there aren't really any easy games when you are the defending national championships and you're basically every opponent's Super Bowl. Now, I believe the Buckeyes will slip up once or twice in 2025, but not enough for them to fall out of the playoff picture. Number 2, the Oregon Ducks. Now, if Nebraska fans are allowed to be excited about Dylan Raiola's second year as a starter, why shouldn't Oregon fans feel the same way about Dante Moore after his 1 year with similar numbers at UCLA, followed by a year of learning Will Stein's offensive system while sitting behind Dylan Gabriel? Why shouldn't they be excited about that? And if Dante Moore is ready to take the step forward, this whole team might be up for a repeat of a special season like they had in 2024. But also, do not count out Mr. Austin Novosad, who's the other guy who could be starting for this team. Because I believe that between the 2 of them, they have 1 great quarterback, possibly 2. The transfer portal and the high school recruiting ranks have been very good to Oregon. Now, there wasn't anybody in the country that didn't want to add left tackle Isaiah World or the running back Mekhi Hughes from Tulsa this offseason. And Oregon got them both. And they even had the luxury of taking high upside guys like Bear Alexander, not out of necessity, but out of a self-belief that Dan Lanning could get what Lincoln Riley didn't get out of both him and offensive lineman Emmanuel Pregnon. But it doesn't matter how much confidence that you have in a roster if you can't do the same thing on the road that you do at home. And the Ducks this year, they have to fly to Happy Valley to play Penn State. They got to go on the road to play Iowa. And they got to go to Seattle to play Washington this season. And the margin for error there is very thin, especially with a new quarterback. Now, the players on this Oregon team that you have not seen play yet, but you should be excited about, are wide receiver Dacorian Moore. You probably haven't seen too much of Kenyon Sadiq outside of the Big Ten championship game where he had 2 touchdowns against Penn State. But this is an extremely talented roster. They have Tuioti on defense at defensive end. And then that's not even to mention Mateo Uiagalelei, who is a absolutely special player. Their linebackers, that's the biggest question about this team, because they do have Bryce Betcher, who is going to be an NFL draft pick. But overall, this is a very thin group and inexperience behind the 2 starters. But overall, though, this team is going to come down to quarterback play, because everything else around the quarterbacks seems perfect to make a run, not only to the college football playoff, but a chance to win a national championship. Number 1, the Penn State Nittany Lions. If James Franklin cannot do it with this team, then he cannot do it. And if you're not a Drew Aller believer like me, I get it. But there are some NFL scouts that believe he's the next Josh Allen. Not sure why, but they do. And even if you're not buying into Penn State's passing game, you have to admit that you would trade your team's running backs for theirs, because Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are the best running back duo in the country to start the season. And on defense, guys like Zane Durant, Danny Dennis Sutton, and AJ Harris are all probably going to go in the first 3 rounds of the 2026 NFL draft. Now, Penn State really didn't go heavy into the transfer portal outside of adding middle linebacker Amari Campbell out of North Carolina. And then they grabbed up as many wide receivers as they could to get their hands on a vote of confidence in their quarterback, Drew Aller, because that's the thing that everybody's been blaming on Drew Aller not living up to his potential. Now, they fixed that hole, supposedly. And aside from college coaches, other quarterbacks can see when a school like Penn State adds 2,300 yards and wide receivers to its roster. They see a blessing for Aller, and they want it for themselves too. And now Aller's got it. He's got no excuses. James Franklin has no excuses. But this schedule is the primary reason why I'm throwing my number 1 vote behind Penn State. They say James Franklin can't win big games, so he goes out and get a big game defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles from Ohio State, who won a natty last year. And they also have 2 very big names on this year's schedule that they'll need Knowles to work his magic. The September 27th game, where the Nittany Lions host the Oregon Ducks in the Whiteout, and the November 1st game at Ohio State. Now, that comes after a bye. So Penn State can absolutely make the playoff without those 2 wins by running the table the rest of the way and being 10-2. But why even chance it? It is time for James Franklin to win a big game and take the next step. But can he do it? And that is my Big Ten rankings and preview for 2025 in college football. Make sure that you like, subscribe, get notifications, and tell a friend about the show. And most importantly, share and be one of us.